Hello everyone, I'm going to show you how I do my second part of my random collage technique here. I have put in the signature a bunch of backgrounds. I've left a lot of white areas that need to be covered with something. So all I've got here are background images. So I'm going to show you some of the things that I do to put my focal points on. And I try to add large to medium images. I add some pattern paper sometimes. Uh, and this is the place where you'd want to stencil or add rubber stamping to have it in the background underneath your images. And I don't always do that. I'm not going to show how I do that, but you could, add a little bit of stenciling and stamping here. All right, so part two, the main part of this is adding focal images, keeping in mind all the guidelines that I've already went across. The rule of thirds, scale, odd numbers, repetition, and overlapping some of the elements. So I want to show how I decide what I am putting on my page. Now, I fiddle a lot. I like options. I like to audition things, which means I like to have a few things to look at, see if I like them, and choose which one I like the best. So I audition a lot. It is part of the fun for me. I like to see the different images and how they play with each other. And so I spend my time doing the second part because I enjoy it. You may want to just get on with it and just, if you see something you like, just glue it down, and that's perfectly fine. I'll just show you the way that I do it so you have an idea of if you're coming across some kind of obstacles. So I've got a bunch of things here that I want to audition for this first page. This first page, I don't usually put a focal point this prominent on the page. I did this time. I thought that eye was pretty cool. I don't know why I did that. I just did. So now I've got to find something that goes on this very dark background. Now, I thought that maybe this would be a good something. I like the way they blend a little bit, but I don't like the straight lines here. So one of my options is to kind of cut away some of that background, give the image just a little bit of shape, and take away the straight edges and the corners. And she blends into that page just a little bit better. I still don't like this, but I still have the third part, and the third part is fixing the things that have problems. White spaces that are still left over, adding little tiny details, covering spots that you don't want to really be showing on the page. So I can do something with that later. So, but I like that, but I am not entirely sure that's what I want. So I am just going to start auditioning some of these things. I like the looks of the tree, but it's just a little bit too busy for me. I do like this ballerina. I don't like that her hand is going into this eye, and I don't like that this ballerina's leg is cut off. It was just the way the image was in the advertisement. I would have to put that image on the side of the page to disguise that blemish, but she kind of gets lost. You can't really see her there. It's okay, but I don't love it. I do like this little paper doll. I'm using the rule of thirds. He's not front and center. He's kind of off on two of the lines here, which makes him a little more interesting. I like that he's a wooden doll. And I like that he's kind of overlapping this eye. This is an option. I did fussy cut this out. And again, I like the way this overlaps, but this image is just a little bit too busy. You can't really see it against this background. This image needs a dark, this background needs a dark image, and I do like this because she's so dark. She really stands out on all this darkness in the background. She's fussy cut around so you can see the background behind her. She looks like she belongs, but she looks like she's just a little bit too short. I really need her to overlap this other eye. And I can use her and just put maybe a piece of washi tape down here so she doesn't look like she's floating on the page. Give her something to lean on. Or I could use something from my fish bit basket here, find a little bit of something, maybe not something that's too busy, and just find something for her to be coming out of. Those are options. And then my last one, I like her. I like the black cat. You can really see the black cat. And she does overlap without having to mess around with her too much. So these are just some of those options that I would think about. And then when I choose, I will glue it down. I'm just not going to glue right now because I'm just going to show you some of the other things. So here is a background that might be just a little bit too busy. When I start to put focal points on it, they get lost. I think that the background is way too busy. It's too many things are going on. So I can start ripping off some of this background stuff. Sometimes it takes too much. Sometimes I've glued it on way too well and it's not coming off at all. But I think that was just too busy. So the other option is to find another paper that I've already used in the background, like this little dotted paper. And add a little bit of something to tone down the background. Kind of like that. And then when I put my images on, I can actually see what's going on. So sometimes I do have to add just a little bit more to the background if I didn't realize that they were really busy to begin with. Just add a little bit more, something in the same color family, something to tone that down a little bit, and you might be happier with your collage. So the next thing I want to talk about is adding images, and of course we're keeping in mind those little guidelines that I did the video on. The rule of thirds, scale, odd numbers, repetition, and overlapping. So I've got these 3 images, and you can see those images pretty well on the background. I don't like the fact that they're square. The straight edges really catch my eye. And I don't like the fact that they are not interacting with each other. I've got 3 images, so I've got an odd number, and they are pretty cool images. They have some interest to them, but they're not interacting with each other. They're just sitting here on the page. So what I can do is, I've got this girl, and part of the background is still there. I just fussy cut around an edge so that I can cover some of the background white bits with her background, and she can still overlap an image, and you can still see both images. I like to do that. It adds interest when the images are overlapping. They look like they are interacting with each other. So I don't like this straight line, and I've cut into her. I don't know, there must have been something that I found on the back side or something. So I can add another image that's torn, a torn edge on the top of that. And she interacts, or I should actually put her on top of both images. She interacts, well, all three images are touching, they're overlapping. There's some interest there. So I do, play around with things to see how they interact, if they will interact, if there's something there to make some interest on the page. So over here is just a square image on this background. If I use a large image, it really does just make the whole thing a little bit more interesting. Putting maybe the boat in the tree, if I fussy cut the boat out or something. So this is the part that I like. I like playing around with the images and seeing how they interact. So what I think about when I'm thinking about collage, random collage, it's like creating a dream. While you're dreaming, things, they make sense. You don't question anything. The rabbit's talking, whatever. And creating a collage is kind of like that. It doesn't really need to make sense for it to look interesting. You don't realize that you're not making any sense until you wake up and think about it for a second. Wait a minute, that was a talking rabbit. So that's what we're doing. We're just creating a dream image. It's more interesting if it doesn't make sense. The images don't need to be the same kind of thing. A girl and blueberries and a choir, they make absolutely no sense. Why would they be together? But they look good together, so you don't think about it so much. There's not really a theme. So the second part, all I'm doing is I'm seeing where I've got some white spaces, and I'm just covering those white spaces with something to create the page. I want to add the focal images, and so I'm trying to cover as many of these white spots as I possibly can. Here's another one. So I think this guy, he covers the white spot. I didn't fussy cut him out, so I can use some of this background to cover up some of the background white spots, the holes. And I like the color of this guy. He looks like he's looking at the other guy, and that's another one of those things that I do keep in mind. When something has a face, you want that face, if he's looking in a different direction, you want the face to be looking into the page. You don't want the face to be looking outside, because that implies that something is interesting outside the page. If you let him look into the page, he's looking in, he's drawing you into this page. So it's just one of those. But his line is kind of straight, and his is too. And there's, even though it is a torn edge, it still looks pretty straight. The contrast is pretty drastic. So I can go to my fish bits, get a piece of collage, and collage something over that, and that helps to blend him in a little bit so the edge is not quite so straight. I can also kind of fussy cut him out a little bit. And here's another this is a pretty straight edge as well. And here's a little image of Paris that I've torn all out. And I could just put that over the straight edge, blend that corner in a little bit, and that blends the peacock in a little bit. So I do like to blend images with other images, torn edges, to make the elements in the page seem like they fit just a little bit better. When I was going through my images, I did find these wings, and I was looking and I thought, oh, well, he would be really cool with wings. So I'm thinking that I need to fussy cut the wings out and maybe just kind of cut a little bit of the shape of him out just a little bit so that you can see the wings behind him. But I think that might be the page. I'm not going to spend time doing it, but I'm thinking that might be what I do there. I wanted to do some other little bits. So here's an image, Statue of Liberty. She had a really red background. Now I like the contrast, but she was way too fussy to have to fussy cut around, so I left some of that background. Now, she doesn't really work very well on a white page. You see too much of that background. It's just too distracting. But if I put her on the red, it blends it nicely together, and it doesn't make the background quite so obvious. So that's another thing that I'm looking at when I'm messing about. Another thing that I do, sometimes I leave the images as I find them, with the white borders and things like that. I never know where I'm going to have a white spot that I need to cover up. That's what I'm doing in this part. I'm adding focal points, and I'm trying to add them in places so that there's no white spots left on the page. So I like him. I like the background of him, but I don't necessarily want to fussy cut him out. I like the colors. I think the colors are spectacular. So I would probably put him in a corner so that these straight edges would stay on the straight. And I have torn from the square, I have just torn these two edges so I can use that. And it doesn't quite look like I have torn it out. It kind of blends to the background. It would blend better if the background was in blues and greens and things like that. So you can overlap edges to blend them in, or you can tear the edges to blend that element in. So you have options. Let's see. So here's another one that I wanted to talk about. Now, it's got a lot of blank spots on this side. I really liked this orange. It kind of goes with the orange here. So I really wanted to use a bit of that orange. And then I found another hand. So I thought it might be interesting to have two hands. But maybe not. Maybe it's just too much. And I liked the orange in this image too, but it's a little bit too busy. I don't like the straight edges here, so I would probably rip some of that so it's not quite so straight. which blends it into the background really a lot more. But the bottom still has some issues. And I can cover that with something like that so you don't see it quite as much. So this is where I start playing around. Okay, I've got a white spot over here, and that would be kind of fun right there. Of course, there's no relationship at all with these images. They just happen to fit in this spot. And then I liked this little kitty standing on these stairs with the same kind of color scheme. So I thought maybe I should put that on the page somewhere. We've got some different kind of scale. We've got some interesting things going on. I could put a little bit of this face to cover up that straight edge and start building. And I don't like this down here, so I'm going to put that little image there. Start building the collage. Just start adding things however you want to add them, taking away the white spots and seeing what they look like together, and just auditioning things, seeing how they look, seeing how they interact, and seeing if you like what the page is looking like. I usually do this before I start gluing things down. I want to know that I like where it's going. Now this is pretty busy. The images, there's a lot going on, but it's interesting. So I will probably do something to that effect. Do something that tones it down quite a bit. It's kind of interesting having the repetition of the two hands. If I could find a third one, I might put it on the other side, but it adds some interest there. So all I'd need to do is cut. This has got a little word there that I really don't like, and so I would probably cut that off, and that would probably be kind of my page. A little bit more fussing with it, and that would be it. And then I just wanted to talk about one more. Sometimes I do leave straight edges. And I came across this and I thought I liked the black cat, and the blue really went with the page. And I've got this huge white spot here, and I thought, yes, that would go on there nicely. So let me cut off the white edges. Since I'm not going to tear it, I think I'm just going to cut it square. I think that'll make the cat a little bit more dramatic. If you can see the straight edges there. So that's what I'm going to do. And I thought it would be funny to put a body on the cat. So he's not just a head hanging there. And so I picked some different images and thought that I would try. Now, I really like that one. I think that's funny with her hands. I don't know if I like the pink purse though. But I think her shoulders look perfect with this cat's head. Here was another one. Again, I thought that might just work. The black and white image with that cat. And then I came across this one. And it made me laugh. The first time I saw it, I thought, oh, yes, The little mama cat with her baby cat sitting there. So I would probably fussy cut her out a little bit, not necessarily her head. So I'm just going to cut around it for now. I'm not going to cut her head off until I know for sure that that's what I'm going to use. And then I'm going to cut around her here, just to give her less straight edges and a little less background. And I need to cut this part off as well so I can see that side. Here we go. You have to line it up just right just to get a good idea of what it would look like. But I'm not quite sure which one I like better. I do like this one with her hands just placed just so, but I really like the baby kitty. And so it might end up to be just like that. Of course, she's floating on the page, so I would have to put something on the bottom there. Maybe a torn edge or something so that she doesn't look like she's floating. But so this is what I do for part 2. I get my basket full of images out. Some of them are fussy cut, some of them are square. And I'm just adding focal points, some large to medium focal images. Sometimes I need to put a little bit of paper, a little bit of background, something in the background for the image to work on the page. But that's all I'm doing in part 2. I'm mostly focusing on larger images, trying to get the images to interact with each other, and getting stuff on the page. Just finding some stuff to go on the page. I'm thinking about the rule of thirds. I need some things in the background. I want to make sure I've got some interest in the background. Maybe not quite that dark, but things. You don't want your focal image to be like that, not very interesting. It's too much pressure for there to be only one focal image on a page. You want them, that you want your lead singer, your lead image to have some backup, so that your lead singer has some backup singers in the background. It makes it more interesting. So that's what I'm doing, giving stuff. That's kind of interesting. Putting things in the background, making sure my white spots are covered with something. I don't have to go absolutely crazy about the white spots, because in the third part, that's when I fix holes and make sure things aren't floating, things like that. And I will come back with that video as soon as I get this one done. So I want to make sure that I'm overlapping things, that there's repetition, that the pages are interesting, and that's what all I do for part 2. And this is my most time-consuming part, because I do audition quite a bit of different things. I want my pages to be the way I want them to be. So I go through a lot of different options, because I enjoy seeing what different things will look like. So I spend time in this one. I spend time here. It's what I enjoy doing, so of course I'm going to spend more time doing the parts that I really enjoy. So that's all we're doing, adding focal points, trying to cover up some of those white spots, and making sure that our page has a lot of interest, a lot of things going on. We're making a dream. Collage is like creating a dream. It's only while you're dreaming the odd things make sense. So it doesn't have to make sense. It does not have to make sense. It just has to be what you want it to be. Okay? Thanks for watching.